Sloane Reeves said flatly, her manicured hands folded neatly on the polished conference table. Your salary doesn't align with our new compensation structure. Two security guards hovered by the door, their presence making the implication clear. This is effective immediately. I looked at her, taking in the pricey silk blouse and the meticulously practiced expression of corporate remorse behind those trained eyes. I could see what she truly believed, that I was just another line item to be cut in the post-merger efficiency sweep. I understand. I responded calmly and smilingly, I wish you all the best. My name is Marissa Langley, and I have been in charge of the Enterprise Accounts Division at Crosswell and Pine for the past 10 years. In Richmond, Virginia, I actually created that department from the ground up, building relationships with our most important clients until my team was in charge of 40% of the company's yearly revenue. It took 10 years of early mornings and late nights, canceled vacations, and postponed family get-togethers to ensure that our clients felt appreciated, and all of that in less than 15 minutes. It was over. As my team watched in stunned silence, many of them crying, I gathered my personal belongings from my office and gave them each a hug, whispering encouragement and thanking them for their hard work. I then left the building without protest, holding my head high, and as the glass doors closed behind me, I took a deep breath of the cool autumn air. I'm sorry, Mrs. Langley. This doesn't feel right. It's okay, Thomas. Change is part of business. However, as I drove home, the gravity of what had happened finally hit me. The security guard who had escorted me out, Thomas, who had worked there for 12 years and whose daughter I had helped get an internship last summer, looked apologetic. Because I believed in what we were creating, Pine put off starting a family, missed my father's 70th birthday celebration, and battled pneumonia to close our largest account. 3 months ago, when the merger with Ardentix Group was announced, I had my doubts because of their infamously ruthless corporate culture and rumors of their strip-and-sell tactics. Sloane wanted my clients, not the person who had gained their trust. She believed that those relationships would transfer easily to whoever took my place. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and realized that this was more than just a compensation issue. For years, the board had assured us that our company's values would remain intact. The first call came as I was still unpacking my box of office supplies, and it was Harold Fletcher, CEO of Fletcher Logistics, one of our biggest clients. I thought to myself, what the hell is going on? I just heard you're out. It was true, Harold, the new management. Sloane Reeves was going to learn a valuable lesson about the difference between clients and relationships. Harold and I had a relationship that went beyond the usual client-vendor relationship when his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. You have been our point person for 7 years, and you helped us get through that nightmare with the Asia-Pacific expansion. My board trusts you. I could hear the genuine concern in his voice, and it touched me. I'm grateful that Harold put them in touch with the specialist who saved her life from cancer last year, but businesses and priorities change. Our top priority is working with people we trust. I'm calling Sloane Reeves myself. Similar conversations ensued throughout the day, with each client expressing shock, confusion, and, in some cases, you're taking this remarkably well, my husband, James, said as he prepared dinner that evening while I sat at our kitchen island scrolling through dozens of messages from clients and colleagues. I was careful not to criticize Crosswell or Ardentix because there was no need to do so. Though the reality was more nuanced, I had suspected this might occur since the merger was announced. Ardentix had a pattern of acquiring businesses with solid client relationships, cutting the pricey relationship managers, and hoping the clients stuck around. What good would falling apart do? I asked. Sloane didn't realize that my clients weren't just loyal to Crosswell and Pine, they were loyal to me. I wasn't just the head of the department. I was the one who took their calls at midnight when issues arose, remembered their children's names, and looked forward to their calls. Inertia it worked frequently enough to become their standard procedure, but they had miscalculated this time. James, who knew me too well to assume I didn't have a plan, asked, "So what's your plan?" I took a sip of wine and considered the non-compete clause in my contract. It was strict but manageable, and more significantly, I knew exactly which clients would follow me once it was in place. I smiled, but my mind was already racing with possibilities. The news of my termination quickly spread throughout Richmond's business community, and by the next morning, my phone was flooded with messages from former coworkers, industry contacts, and even competitors expressing their hopes that we would finally take the trip to Portugal that we had been discussing. Incredulous, I spent the day setting up my home office and answering messages. At noon, my ex-assistant Eliza called and whispered, "It's chaos here." Sloan had been in emergency meetings all morning, and Fletcher Logistics, Westland Manufacturing, and Davidson Partners asked why you were fired. In a neutral tone, I said, "Marissa, she's telling everyone that you were being difficult and asking for an unreasonable compensation package after the merger." I chuckled quietly, which is interesting because I was never even given the chance to negotiate. Everyone knows it's not true, and your team is incensed. We're all updating our resumes following the call. I sat back in my chair and thought about how Sloan was already formulating a story to support my dismissal. It was cliched but ill-considered, and the clients knew me too well to think I had prioritized my own interests over theirs. Later that afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. In the form of Gerald Davidson, the 80-year-old founder of Davidson Partners. Gerald was my first significant client when I joined Croswell and Pine. He had taken a chance on me when I was still establishing myself, and that trust had been earned. He said, "I hope I'm not intruding," as I opened the door and leaned slightly on his cane. However, some conversations shouldn't take place over the phone, so I invited him in and made tea. Became a friendship that went beyond business. This morning, when I spoke with Sloan Reeves, he said his grizzled hands were wrapped around the teacup. "She gave me some bullshit about reorganizations and pay packages. That seems to be the official line." I responded, "Marissa, I've been in business. Davidson Partners has been with Croswell and Pine for more than 50 years because of you. When my grandson struggled with substance abuse, you found him the treatment program that changed his life. When we had to change course during the pandemic, you were there with answers while everyone else was trying to sell me a bunch of garbage." Fearfully, he reached into his jacket and took out an envelope. "This is a formal letter informing Croswell that we are reviewing our contract. I wanted you to know before they did, Gerald. I value your loyalty, but I don't want you to base business decisions on your emotions." He grinned, his brows furrowing. When Gerald left, I sat with the realization that the first domino had fallen, not because I had pushed it, but because relationships based on genuine care and trust have their own momentum. It was both sobering and empowering to realize that I had been building relationships for years, not just doing a job. Without you there, the quality of service will decline. 3 days following my termination, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Diane Reynolds from Ardentix Legal, and the person's voice was clipped. "We wanted to check in because we've noticed some strange activity with our key accounts." I went to my home office window and looked out at the maple trees. "We think you might be contacting our clients and possibly breaking the terms of your non-compete agreement." I had expected this call, and Sloan was feeling the pressure. However, the tree in our front yard is turning brilliant shades of orange and red, and I'm not sure how I can help with that, Diane. I no longer work for the company. We have reason to believe you're actively undermining the business, but that's just not true, Diane. I have been nothing but professional, and I haven't approached any clients or solicited business with the intention of taking their business. I responded honestly, but if clients have contacted me personally, that's their prerogative. I cannot control how clients react to my departure. After a heated back and forth, Diane concluded by threatening to take legal action if I broke my agreement. I hung up without being intimidated. Later that day, James returned home early from his position as a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. "I bumped into Benjamin Wright at the coffee shop," he said, referring to a mutual friend who worked on Croswell's board, "and he says, all hell is breaking loose." Apparently 4 major clients have formally requested meetings with the board to discuss your termination. Benjamin said that although Sloan has been attempting to handle it on her own, the clients are demanding board involvement and are interrogating her. This was actually faster than I had anticipated. During dinner, we talked about what this might mean. James looked at me knowingly and said, "You're planning something, aren't you?" I twirled spaghetti around my fork. "That's interesting," he added. They had an emergency financial meeting. They're projecting significant losses if these clients leave. Let's just say that I'm thinking about my options. In reality, I had spent the day researching the requirements for starting my own consulting business. Although my non-compete agreement prohibited me from approaching Crosswell's clients directly for a year, it didn't stop me from starting my own company, and if clients did follow me after that, they were no longer bound by any contracts at Crosswell. That would be their choice. Eliza called again the following morning and said, "They're trying to replicate your client notes." She said, "Sloan has the account managers going through every interaction you documented, trying to piece together the relationships." I almost burst out laughing. My client notes were thorough, yes, but they couldn't document the subtleties of relationships developed over years, such as how I remembered to order catering for meetings because Fletcher's daughter was allergic to shellfish, how I always sent Davidson a bottle of his favorite bourbon on his birthday, or how I'd assisted Westland's CFO in resolving a personal crisis that had threatened to blow a big deal. I asked terribly Sloan about it. Yesterday, I had a call with Fletcher Logistics, and he yelled that reading Marissa's notes isn't the same as being Marissa. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and resumed working on my business plan, which I named Langley Strategic Partners. It was straightforward and professional, and I started creating a website and service packages while I was working. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Vivian Park from Westland. Dinner tomorrow. There's something I want to discuss." Interesting. Vivian was Westland's CEO, a brilliant tactician known for her direct approach. "I'd be delighted," I replied, wondering what she had in mind. Vivian picked a quiet, upscale restaurant on the outskirts of Richmond. When I arrived at the table for our dinner, she was already seated, her face brightening. "Thank you for coming, Marissa," she said, getting up to give me a quick embrace. "I've missed our conversations. It's only been a week, Vivian." I laughed. "A week too long." She motioned for me to sit, saying, "I hope you don't mind, but I've invited A. Harold Fletcher and Gerald Davidson were being led to our table by a few colleagues." Before I could reply, behind them was Anthony Torres, CEO of Torres Innovations, another of my former important clients. I asked them what was going on as they sat down. "We're staging an intervention," Harold said with a smile that didn't quite conceal his seriousness. The board had contacted some of them directly in an attempt to patch things up, but the damage had already been done. She tried to tell me that your departure wouldn't affect our service level, Anthony said, shaking his head. In reference to the Crosswell and Pineover appetizers, it was disclosed that each of them had met with Sloan Reeves and left unimpressed. "The larger issue," Vivian added, "is trust. How can we trust a company that so casually throws away someone like you? It demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of why we do business with them." I listened, touched by their loyalty but cautious. Then, they were unable to respond to basic questions about our upcoming product launch information, which you've had for months. Gerald Davidson tapped his water glass with a spoon. "Thanks for the support, but I don't want to be the reason your companies make decisions that might not be in your best interests." "That's exactly why we're here, Marissa. This is about our interests." My non-compete agreement was something they knew about, but they also knew it would eventually expire. They wanted to know if I was going to open my own business in the interim. "We talked about this," Harold said, "and we're willing to wait out your non-compete period. If you have your own consultancy, we want to be your first clients when it ends." "We're not asking you to break any agreements," Vivian clarified. "Just to let you know, we'll be evaluating our options when our contracts with Crosswell are up for renewal." Their well-coordinated approach astounded me. "What about your ongoing projects? We'll fulfill our contractual obligations, Gerald said. But we won't be expanding our services with them. When the time came, it was obvious that they were giving me a lifeline. Assured clientele once I was able to legally collaborate with them once more. This is overwhelming, I acknowledged in the most professional manner possible. Anthony leaned forward. We've also been speaking with other companies in our networks, and there's a lot of interest in your services, Marissa. People who have heard about your methods and want the same degree of attention. And as dinner went on, we took care to avoid talking about specific plans or making concrete arrangements that might go against my agreement. Instead, we discussed business challenges, industry trends, and my thoughts on strategic growth. By dessert, I felt like I had a new purpose again. These weren't just clients lamenting the death of a. Vivian pulled me aside as we were about to leave. We heard Sloan had been implying that you were difficult during the transition, but we all know that's not true, and we've made that very clear to the board. I drove home that night with my mind racing, and the dinner had confirmed what I suspected. The service provider was allies who valued what I brought to their businesses. When I walked through the door, James took one look at my face and knew. Good dinner, life-changing, I replied. The relationships I had formed were also strong enough to endure this change and offered a chance to create something new that truly reflected my values. The following week brought an unexpected development. I got an email from Lawrence Bennett, the chairman of the board at Crosswell and Pine, asking for a meeting. I suggested that we meet at a neutral venue, like a peaceful cafe by the river. When I got there, Lawrence was already there and appeared much more haggard than when I'd last seen him at the company holiday party 6 months prior. Thank you for come, Marissa, he said, firmly shaking my hand. I appreciate your willingness to talk. Of course, Lawrence. What can I do for you? He sighed, stroking his silver hair. I'll be direct. The board is worried about the client's reaction to your departure. We've received formal letters from 6 major accounts expressing their disappointment, and he leaned closer, saying, Marissa, the board feels your termination may have been hasty. We'd like to discuss your return. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I understand that must be challenging. It's more than challenging, it's potentially catastrophic. I had a sneaking suspicion that this would happen, but hearing it still made me jump. In what role are we willing to offer you a promotion? To Senior Vice President of Client Relations, reporting directly to the board? A substantial pay raise, of course. Sloan would continue to serve as CEO, but your Lawrence hesitated. What happens to my team, the people who are currently trying to manage my client relationships? I took a sip of my coffee and thought about his offer. It was tempting, like a kind of vindication, but something felt wrong. There would be some reorganization. Of course, take the weekend to think it over. Translation: those people would be pushed aside to make room for me. The same callous approach that had been used with me would be applied to them. I appreciate the offer, Lawrence, but I need to carefully consider it. He looked relieved, obviously expecting an immediate rejection. Consider it. I called James to break the news to him after he left. Are you thinking about it? I don't know, I said in response to his question, but it would be simpler than starting from scratch. However, it would entail operating beneath. That evening, I received another unexpected call from Eliza, who started with her voice hushed, but Sloan had another outburst today, and Westland Manufacturing told her they wouldn't be renewing their contract with her. She fired me without cause in a company culture that is moving away from everything I value. She is blaming everyone but herself for the contract's expiration next quarter. How are you holding up? It's getting worse, I said, worried about my former team. 2 of the account managers have already resigned, and the rest of us are just trying to keep things from falling apart entirely. I sat in my home office for a while after we hung up, thinking that the board's offer was an easy way to get back to the familiar, with the added satisfaction of Sloan having to own up to her mistake. However, going back would mean sacrificing the vision that had been growing inside of me ever since I was fired from Langley Strategic Partners. I picked up my phone and called Lawrence, saying, I've made my decision, and when he answered, I said, I appreciate the offer, but I must decline. Marissa, please reconsider. My decision is final, Lawrence. It could be something different. A firm that genuinely valued relationships over transactions and that saw clients as partners rather than revenue streams. However, I wish you and the business the best. As I hung up, I felt as though a burden had been lifted. Sometimes the most difficult choices are the ones that ultimately free us. The 6 months went by fast. I used that time to carefully lay the groundwork for Langley Strategic Partners. I found office space in Eliza, and 2 other former coworkers who had left Crosswell and Pine were part of the small but talented team that was hired after a historic building downtown was renovated. I was careful to strictly follow my non-compete agreement and concentrated on building relationships with companies outside of Crosswell's clientele. Word quickly spread in Richmond's business community. As the situation at Crosswell and Pine worsened, I was receiving inquiries from businesses I had never worked with before. I also learned through the grapevine that Fletcher Logistics had cut their contract by 60%, Davidson Partners had moved all new projects to other companies, and Westland Manufacturing had not renewed their contract at all. I woke up feeling strangely at ease the morning my non-compete officially ended. This was the day I had been preparing for, but there was no need to make any big moves because the foundation had already been set. I got to work early and had just gotten comfortable at my desk when my phone rang. Is today the day? Harold Fletcher, we've been holding this project especially for you. By noon, I had received similar calls from Vivian, Gerald, and Anthony. By the end of the week, Langley Strategic Partners had signed contracts with 5 former Crosswell clients, totaling almost $2 million in annual revenue. I smiled and said, "It's great. I'm sending over the contract we discussed." Stole one customer I didn't have to. They approached me voluntarily, just as we had discussed over dinner 6 months prior. The highlight of my day was when my assistant forwarded an email sent to my new work address from Sloan Reeves, asking for a meeting to discuss possible cooperation. 1 year after I was fired, Langley Strategic Partners had expanded to a staff of 15 and served 22 clients in a variety of industries. We had relocated to larger offices and were building a reputation for quality and honesty. I was going over quarterly projections when Eliza knocked on my office door. "You have a visitor," she said, looking slightly. Sloan Reeves looked much less put together than she had the day she fired me. Her confident posture was gone, replaced by a tense, almost desperate energy. I raised an eyebrow, but I don't remember having an appointment with her. "You don't? She just showed up and insisted on seeing you." I sighed, sending her in. She took a deep breath and said, "What can I do for you, Sloan?" Without waiting for an invitation, she started to take the seat across from my desk. "We've lost 40% of our revenue since your departure, and the board is considering drastic measures, including a potential sale of the company." I waited, thinking there might be more, and I wanted to offer a solution. I reiterated, "Yes, with you taking on a leadership role." Of course, I observed her and realized the desperation behind her proposal. This wasn't about cooperation, it was about a merger between our companies, where your client relationships and our infrastructure could be extremely powerful. We have very different approaches to business and client relationships, so I said, "Marissa, please, I wish you all the best, Sloan," but my response was no. As she departed, I felt no victory or vindication, just a quiet confirmation that I had made the right decision, and the retaliation I had envisioned wasn't in witnessing Crosswell and Pine struggle. Instead, it was in the success I had built from the ground up, where I had demonstrated my worth not through conflict but through perseverance and consideration. I discovered that sometimes the most effective response isn't fighting. It's moving forward now, and I discovered more than simply success in that forward momentum, but satisfaction.